Hello everybody and welcome back to yet another video, and to a very special video because today I'm going to be going over my top 5 most wanted Cars diecasts from each episode of Cars on the Road. All 9 episodes, top 5 from each of them. Now, you will see some entries where the spots are tied. If two characters are very closely related to each other, they will probably share an entry, so technically it's going to be more than 5 for many of the episodes, but still, I'm going to be going through each episode one by one, going through my top 5 most wanted cars from each of them. Without further ado, let's get started with episode 1, Dino Park. And remember, this video is completely, totally my subjective opinion. If you see some stuff on this list that you don't agree with, again, it's all just completely my opinion. And this is probably going to be one of the most opinionated ranking videos I've ever done on my channel, since it's just specifically what I want to see. Anyway, episode 1. At spot number 5 for Dino Park, we have Caveman Mater and Caveman Lightning McQueen, a tie between the two of them. You're going to see this a lot on the list. A lot of episodes have corresponding variants of both Lightning and Mater, and they are pretty much always going to be paired up with each other here on the list. Dino Park, honestly, was probably one of my least favorite episodes in the series. Really not that much went on in it, and it's pretty difficult to come up with even just 5 cars from it, since most of the cars we see in this episode are of course models of dinosaurs, most of which would be too big to be released. Of course, we know that we're getting the T-Rex as a playset, large-scale plastic vehicle, but other than that, there isn't all that much. But I did find a bunch of other things from this episode, and all of them, honestly, I liked a lot more than these Mater and McQueen designs. They're cool, they're clever, they have a lot of fun details, like Mater's giant rock tow hook, and McQueen's, like, bamboo spoiler. These will be fun. I'm sure we'll get them soon, especially considering the fact that the box of the dinosaur car features artwork of that McQueen and Mater. I'm sure we'll get them at some point very, very soon. They're just not the most interesting to me, because this episode wasn't the most interesting to me, and I felt the scene that included them was quite a bit weaker than I had hoped. There were a lot of different dinosaur cars in the background of the episode, and this guy, I don't believe he was named, but he made his way onto the number 4 spot on the list. I had to be pretty careful while choosing the dinosaurs for this list, because I wanted to choose ones that I think could realistically be chosen as deluxes. This guy already may be a bit too big, but maybe Mattel could make it work as a deluxe. I don't think this is a realistic pick. There's only really one dinosaur car that I think they'll make as a diecast, and I'll get to that when I get to that. But yeah, wanted to throw this guy out there because I think he's really fun, and there's only one other dinosaur in this top 5 list, so I'm sort of putting this guy in this spot to represent all the other little dinosaurs we see throughout this episode that I just don't think have a chance of being made. Most of them are probably way too big to cut it as a deluxe, and aren't significant enough to make it as a playset. Appearing very, very briefly in the episode is something that I didn't even notice until rewatching it to make this list. It's a Caveman Pitty. I absolutely love this guy. He's a statue of a Caveman Pitty who has little tusks sticking out of his mouth, and he has giant tusks for his fork arms. Those look like they would not be efficient at carrying anything ever, but the fact that this is here is just so funny to me, and I didn't notice it on my first watch of the episode. I absolutely love this guy. There's no problem with the scaling. They could probably sell him as a single all by himself. There's quite a bit to him. He'd probably be pretty big. I expect him to probably be around the size of like Maru from Planes, but number 3, Caveman Pitty. At spot number 2, we have the Quadratorchosaur, the dinosaur that I think is most likely to be released by Mattel. It's not all that big, it appears in the episode at several different points, and it has a really fun design. Regardless, honestly, I don't care which of these dinosaurs get made. As long as we get at least one of them, I'll be happy, and I think this would be a great one to get. Preferably, I'd like to get more than one, but again, don't really know how likely that is just for sizing and scaling, but still, this guy would be really great to get. And at spot number 1, we have On the Road Ramon. Remember at the beginning of this video when I said this list would be incredibly subjective? Yeah, my number 1 for Dino Park is the new Ramon design. It appears very, very briefly in the show. I think Ramon only really has one line, but it's a new design for Ramon nonetheless, and I'd love to get it as a diecast. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. Ramon is always one of my favorite characters to collect, and I'm still surprised that they went out of their way to design a new Ramon paint job for his very brief appearance in the season. It's something that I'm very glad that they did. I thought we would just get purple Ramon again, but no, they made a new Ramon design for this show, so I really hope that we get to see it as a diecast soon. At spot number 5 for Lights Out, we have this car who's basically a Grim Reaper car, right? He chases lightning down a hallway for quite a while, and he's a pretty interesting design. He's a car that I'd say is probably a bit too long to cut it as a deluxe, but I'm sure that they could work something out with him. Originally, a lot of people speculated that this would be Mater, but it's not. Again, I think it's basically supposed to be like a Grim Reaper car, and of course it chases McQueen at the end of his nightmare. Another car that I don't think is very likely, but it's spot number 5 on the list, and I know a lot of people would be commenting about it if I didn't include it. Although this list is still just my opinion, I thought I should throw it on there. It is pretty notable and would be really cool to get. It'd probably be like the size of the Santa car. I think the best place to put it would probably be a multi-pack. If they continue to do these story packs or different episodes, it would be a great excuse to get some larger characters out, just like what they did with the Santa car, or like with Mater with Mater with Lightning Bolt Hat a few years back, where he was too big to cut it as a single. He wouldn't really work as a deluxe, so they threw him into a multi-pack. I think that would be a great way to release this guy. At spot number 4, we have the Ghost cars. Any of them. I'm not picky. Specifically, I guess I'd probably like to see some of the Model Ts. It would be cool to get some more Model Ts in the Cars diecast line, aside from just Lizzie and Stanley, but getting some of the 50s cars would be cool as well. I'm kind of over the 50s cars with just how many Legend racers we got last year, but any of the Ghost cars would be awesome to get. How would they pull this off? Of course, you can't really make translucent green metal. Well, I think what Mattel is gonna do is probably make these guys be glow-in-the-dark, do a sort of glow-in-the-dark green color scheme. I think that'll work out just fine. And they'd probably do maybe clear wheels. I know they've done clear wheels on Hot Wheels because the wheels aren't metal, the wheels are plastic. I don't know. I think however we get the Ghost cars, it's probably going to disappoint some people because you simply can't make clear metal. But I think doing glow-in-the-dark and just doing some really nice paint work on them and really good shading would make them all look really good. At spot number 3, we have the Ghost Tractor. I need to include the Ghost Tractor. He needs his own separate segment, okay? The fact that there's a Ghost Tractor is just something that I find really funny. Just a fun background detail that for whatever reason in this haunted house, one of the spirits trapped inside is just a tractor. They're just chilling out. They're hanging out in the Destiny Hotel. They're doing fine. They're a ghost. They're happy with their life. Let's get the Ghost Tractor. Come on, Mattel. At spot number 2, we have Randy, the founder of the hotel, of course, who is a hearse. This car would be a pretty easy one to make. You just use the Steve Hersel mold and just give him some new crooked teeth, give him a bit of a repaint. I believe he's a bit more of a, sort of a maroon color as compared to the black color scheme of Steve Hersel, so he would need a repaint. I got quite a few comments from people saying they'd like to see Ghost Randy. Personally, I would prefer the alive Randy that we see throughout most of the episode, but the Ghost Randy would be cool too. I just probably prefer this version of him, and it's another hearse, which is pretty cool. As long as they don't make a hot rod version, I'm cool with it. At spot number 1, we have the Shining Girls, the 2 cars that appear at the end of the hallway in the hotel in a parody of the iconic scene with the 2 creepy girls in the hallway in The Shining. I am so happy, I guess you could say, to see this parody in this episode. It's just something really funny. It's something that gets parodied in children's media quite a bit for some reason, but still, it's just such a funny thing that we have a reference to The Shining in the Cars series. I would love to get these 2 from the scene. Bonus points if they also make the creepy, like, destroyed versions from a few seconds later in the episode. They never would, but I'd love to get those too. Salt Fever has been getting the most attention from the diecast line so far, which makes sense. These are all very unique and interesting looking racers. Unfortunately, I immediately had to remove what would probably be the top pick for this episode because it was actually revealed. The long car land racer that passes by Lightning and Mater in a visual gag has actually been confirmed to be released as a diecast. Now, it has been shrunken down, and it looks like it's being split up into 3 separate parts. If you look closely at this image of the diecast, you can see there are 2 seam lines. It seems like with some other past releases like Stu Scatter Shields or Sergeant High Gear or the Mater with hats, this car is going to be broken up into pieces and you're going to have to assemble it, which makes sense. It's the only way they could possibly make her as a single, and still, I think she's a little bit too short. Anyway, yeah, she definitely would have made it to the #1 spot, but she actually got revealed, so I mean, I see that as an absolute win, right? Anyway, taking the #5 spot for this episode is Blue, the crashed Salt Flats racer that has quite the resemblance to Fishtail from the Demolition Derby. Of course, she's using a model based off of Fishtail, but with a few modifications. A lot of the racing decals are gone. Not really decals, they're all spray paint on Fishtail. You also have a bit of the exhaust missing. It's just an interesting background character based off of a very unique character from Cars 3. It would require Mattel to probably make a new mold. Maybe not. I mean, the exhaust on the hood is different, but yeah, #5 is this Salt Flats racer, who again I believe was named Blue. At spot #4, I'm going with this pickup truck. Yeah, the fact that we're already getting most of the Salt Flats racers that we see throughout the episode is really limiting my options here. I know we haven't gotten Super Speed Mater as a diecast yet, but honestly, it's not the most interesting design in my opinion, and it's something we're basically guaranteed to get, so I decided to fill my picks with some more interesting options. Like, again, this pickup truck, who of course pushes racers off onto the Salt Flats, has a few lines throughout the episode, and has this interesting little bumper pusher thing attached to his front bumper. Something unique, something we've never seen really in the Cars series before, and I think he would make for a really nice background character. At spot #3, we have the diesel truck, the next-gen hauler cab that's all souped up to race on the Salt Flats that Lightning mentions while he's going through all the different types of cars racing there. This is a pretty interesting design. There's really not all that much to it. It's just a next-generation hauler cab with a bit of a shorter hat, I want to say, and just a few exhaust pipes and off-road tires and some racing logos or decals on it. Still, it's really cool, and I think it's definitely worth a slot on the list. Probably should mention that we've actually never received a next-gen hauler cab sold as a deluxe before like we have for regular cabs, but I'm sure that we'll probably get them eventually. This one I think will probably be the first one we get, since it literally doesn't have a hauler, really. It doesn't have a hauler for it, so the only way this would be released is as a deluxe. At spot #2, we have this land racer, pretty similar to the long car, but of course quite a good deal shorter. I'm honestly surprised that they decided to do the land racer long car before this one. This one would probably be a whole lot easier to make and is also a lot more single package friendly. This car appears for quite a few seconds in the episode. They're the first car that we see go off onto the Salt Flats, and they definitely make for a pretty cool release. Out of all of the cars that I've listed on the Salt Fever section of the top 5 list, I think this one is the most realistic pick. I think this one will probably appear pretty soon after the other guys come out. And also I think we'll get the diesel truck eventually, but probably soon. But again, this guy I think is the most realistic choice for one that will be releasing soon. At spot #1, we have the rocket-powered car. Will we ever see this one release? I think it's kind of a long shot, but considering the fact that Mattel has shown quite a bit of dedication with these crazier car designs, such as, again, releasing the long car, I think that we definitely could possibly see the rocket-powered car get released. The front and top engine could probably be fit into a deluxe package, and then you would have to attach the 2 other engines on the sides, maybe, I don't know. It's a very large vehicle. Maybe this one could come in a multi-pack, but I'm not sure. I think it's pretty unrealistic to ask for this, but I don't know. I have a feeling Mattel may just pull it off. At spot number 5 for the episode The Legend, I'm having a tie between the fishtail and blind spot variants that we see in this episode. This episode, of course, features as part of Ivy's backstory a scene in which she has to jump over several cars, most of which, except for one for some reason, are based off of the Demolition Derby racers from Cars 3. Several of them are just straight up reusing the models, like Taco and Liability, but Fishtail and Blind Spot actually have some different designs. Their sides are blank. They don't have anything on their sides, although their hoods and roofs are the same. Also, Fishtail seems to have a little bit of a coloration difference. I would like to see these as diecast just to get some confirmation on whether or not they're the same characters. I assume they probably are. Maybe this is just what they look like when they're not doing Demolition Derby racing. Of course, on the sides, typically the Demolition Derby racers have slogans and sponsors. You could still see tacos in the show, because again, Taco was kept completely the same. But for Fishtail and Blind Spot here, I'd really like to see these, and it's kind of cool to have them without their side logos. Maybe it's them before they got those sponsors, it's them maybe before they were racing the Demolition Derby, or maybe it's them trying to be passed off as different characters. Who knows? Either way, I'd like to see them, and I'd like them to be stated as variants of Fishtail and Blind Spot and the other Demolition Derby racers. It would just be kind of stupid if they claimed they're different characters. As far as, like, realism goes, I think these are some of the least likely cars to get made on this entire list. I'd love to be proven wrong, but I just highly doubt we'll ever see them. Heck, I expect Mattel to just re-release the regular variants of, like, Fishtail and Blind Spot next year with As Seen and On the Road logos on them instead of As Seen in Cars 3. Only time will tell, but again, I really doubt we'll get these different variants. We've already received the first of the Cryptid Hunters, Griswold, so I wasn't really sure whether or not to put the other two on this list, since they're inevitable. We're gonna get them soon. But since there really isn't all that much in the Legend episode, I decided to throw them on the list anyway. I honestly prefer these other two over Griswold. Griswold is basically just Bill Revs with camera equipment. The other two cars, the RV and the other one, have camo details and are a lot more interesting in my opinion. At spot number 3, we have Ivy. Obviously, she had to make the list here somewhere. Specifically, I'm referring to her clean variant, although I do hope we get the mossy version of her as well. I also hope we get the yellow painted version that appears later on in the season. But yeah, Ivy is basically the only new character in this series to appear in more than one episode. I wasn't the biggest fan of her, but I do really like her design, and it's cool to have a major character that's a monster truck. And she's just a very important character, so hopefully we see her soon. Of course, she's getting a plastic release and a playset, but this is really one of the most necessary characters from the series for us to get. Hopefully she's in the next deluxe wave. If not, that's going to be a very strange exclusion. At spot number 2, we have the Cryptid Hunter variants of Lightning and Mater. Yeah, kind of surprising that these two made it this high up on the list. Originally, I just thought it was Mater and Lightning with additional lights and such on them. They probably wouldn't have even made the list at first, but then I noticed something. I noticed that they had the little Cryptid Hunter badges on the side, and they also had camo paint on the sides, and that makes me really want to see these two as diecast, specifically their variants without the lights and all their gear. I would ideally like to see a release of them with the gear, with the lights, and a release without. Hopefully that happens. Will it happen? I don't know. I think releasing them with the gear is more likely, but I have a feeling Mattel will probably do both. Not too sure on that. At spot number 1, we have Alien Lightning McQueen. It's McQueen with a sheet over him to make himself look like an alien, Charlie Brown style. He's designed after the Mama UFO from Unidentified Flying Mater with how the eyes are done and all that. This is great. This was really the only thing when I was watching the show where I saw it and immediately thought, I've got to see a die cast of that. I know that's kind of strange, but I just thought it was so funny. I don't know how they do it. Maybe they do it like Cupcake McQueen. I think that's more likely, with like a plastic sheet that goes over it, that just goes over a regular Road Trip McQueen, or a Cryptid Hunter McQueen would actually be what's accurate to the scene. But yeah, Alien McQueen is number 1. Sorry if that's disappointing or a weird choice. I just think it's really funny. Also, to everyone out there who wants the alien victim Mater, I just don't think that's going to work. He's hovering, he has all these tubes coming out of him. That just wouldn't really work as a diecast release. Showtime is another episode that we've gotten quite a few diecasts based off of already, but of course there are quite a few diecasts in this episode, and there were more than enough for me to make my top 5 list. So let's start off with number 5, which goes out to all of the Guido molded clown pitties, all of the clown pitties that use Guido's model, that jump off of the wings of the circus stunt biplane. These were on the poster. They appear with the circus stunt plane. There are 6 of them in total, and I'm kind of surprised that they chose to release the circus stunt performer pitty in the Showtime 4-pack instead of these guys. Ideally, I just like to see 2 of them packed together as one single, so that you could just buy 3 sets of that and have the 6 that appear on the wings of the biplane. Not the most interesting of these clown cars, but still one that I definitely think should be made. At spot number 4, we have the Suki model clown car. The clown car that appears several times throughout the episode for quite a few pretty funny jokes that reuses the model of Suki and several of the other Japanese background cars from Tokyo Mater and Cars 2. I'm kind of surprised this one hasn't been revealed yet. Mattel re-releases the cars with this mold literally every single year for literally no reason. So come on, Mattel. Use that mold, and instead of releasing Chisaki, make this one, please. Mattel, I know you love your goth car, but please, release this one instead. Give Chisaki a break. Spot number 3 is going to go out to McQueen with a clown nose. I just think it's funny to have McQueen with a big red nose on his front. That's it. No, the real reason I want this is because it reminds me of the Cars 2 deleted opening, where McQueen is ambushed by a troop of clown pitties and is painted to look like a clown. I've had a custom that I made of it that I've had for several years now, and it's kind of cool to have a semi-official clown McQueen that appears in Cars canon, even if it is just a nose. It reminds me of one of the craziest Cars deleted scenes. Spot number 2 is going to go out to May Pillar-Derev, the co-host of the circus and sister of Kay Pillar-Derev. They made some really dumb decisions with Kay Pillar-Derev's diecast, releasing her as both a single and in a 2-pack, but not in a 2-pack with her sister and the other host of the circus, May. No, she's in a 2-pack with just regular old Mater. And why did they do that? This was a perfect opportunity to release these 2 cars, and then they decided, you know what, let's put out Kay as a single as well. So there's still no May, there's only Kay, and I don't know why. that almost rhymed, but I was trying to make that rhyme, but I just couldn't get it to work. At spot number 1, we have the janitor pitty, or the sad clown pitty, whatever you want to call him. This guy appeared on the poster for On the Road, and he was in the episode quite a bit more than I thought he would be. This guy is simple. He would probably require a new mold just based off of some pre-existing pitties, plus the nose, and of course make sure you include his broom and a big old frown on his face. This guy would be so funny to see, and I need to make my clown pitty army even larger. Trucks is an episode that really doesn't have all that much to it, but what it does have is a lot of characters. At spot number 5 for the top 5 for Trucks, I'm giving it to the Mr. Drippy remodel that we see in this episode. It was pretty cool to see Mr. Drippy's model reused for a blank water tanker, and that's kind of a running trend you'll see throughout my top 5 list. A lot of cars that appear here are trucks that appeared in other Cars media, but now with no logos on them, and I think that's really cool. If they released it as a diecast, it would work so well as just a regular old water tanker. At spot number 4 for this episode, I'm going to give it to basically any of the hauler cabs we see all throughout this episode. I would like to get basically any of them, specifically the ones with these like additional horns on top of their hats, because that's something new that we haven't really seen before. These should be really easy for Mattel to do. You could simply make them deluxes because the majority of them don't appear with their trailers attached, and if they do, they're literally just blank white trailers. I think it's perfectly fine to get all of these different characters as cabs. They could reuse, of course, the pre-existing piston cup hauler cab mold for their fronts. There are a few Peterbilts in the episode that could reuse the mold from GRA recycled batteries. A lot that you could do, a lot of different multicolored ones that you could make. So yeah. At spot number 3, we have the tow trucks that appear all throughout this episode, simply because they use the same animation model as Herb Kerbler. No, not the 4-wheel drive next gen. Herb Kerbler is also the name of the Piston Cup tow truck from Cars 3. For whatever reason, they accidentally gave both of them the exact same name. Now, we've actually never received a diecast of Herb the tow truck. His name comes from the Meet the Cars book. I assume the reason why we've never gotten him is because he has the same name as another character. But this show features several other tow trucks in this episode that all reuse his model, and I'd love to get them. Also, it would be really nice to have some blank, generic industrial tow trucks without racing logos on them. And again, I'd also like to get Herb the tow truck. I'm putting these guys on the list because if they make them, then they've got to make Herb. Originally, this video was going to be a top 10 list. Just my top 10 cars that I want to see from on the road, period. Just in general. Eventually that expanded out into a top 20 list, and eventually I realized there was just too much to cover all at once. But one car that I always knew would be towards the top of the list no matter what, it may sound ridiculous, but I need to get these red fire trucks released as diecasts. These fire trucks appear throughout the episode. There are several of them, and they reuse the mold from Tiny Lugsworth, the Cars 3 Piston Cup fire truck, just like how the tow trucks in this episode also reuse a mold of an emergency service vehicle from Cars 3. These fire trucks would be just so perfect for me to get. Of course, they are Tiny Lugsworth without his racing logos. For years, I've wanted regular blank fire trucks from the Cars diecast line, which is something we don't really have. Not even with Planes, Fire, and Rescue, of course, where they're all specialized vehicles and named characters. The only other fire trucks we have in the Cars diecast line are Red and Rescue Squad Mater. I've wanted just generic fire trucks for years, and generic police cars, but we still haven't seen any of those really in the Cars series. But yeah, just generic blank red fire truck reusing the Tiny Lugsworth mold would be awesome to get. Just a normal fire truck. And finally, at spot number 1, we have this school bus. Is a bus a truck? I don't really think so, but I guess by this show's standards it is. Anyway, this school bus, I absolutely freaked out when I first saw it, because this school bus is based off of Miss Fritter from Cars 3, but without all of her crazy modifications, without the chain going through her nose, or the horns, or everything else. This is a diecast that I don't expect us to ever get, but it is one that I'd absolutely love to see. Just a blank, regular school bus. Of course, it would require a new mold, since Miss Fritter has all of her modifications molded into the metal of her, but I would just absolutely love to see this. This is definitely my number 1 pick for trucks, an episode that has a lot of great background characters. I know a lot of people are going to be talking about the garbage truck, of course, who is very similar to one we see in Mater Private Eye, but I just think he's too big to get a release. If you just look at him in Mater Private Eye compared to Mater, if this guy's using the same mold, he's way too big, I think. B-Movie was honestly really difficult to narrow down to just 5 cars. At spot number 5, I'm going to be giving it to both Mater paint jobs that we see earlier on in the episode. That being him as the gravedigger and him as the scientist. These would both be pretty fun to get. I'd especially like to see the gravedigger Mater with his shovel and all the dirt all over him. Of course, the alien zombie cars had to make it onto the list. I'm not really the biggest fan of their designs. I don't like how huge the brains are. Obviously, all of these guys would be deluxes with standard cars with these giant things attached to them, which I don't mind. I'd like to get 2 or 3 different ones released. Just not the biggest fan of the designs. I think they're honestly a little bit too over the top for my liking, with just how oversized the brains are. But still, you know, these are ones that we've got to get. They'd be awesome. Alright guys, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to cheat a little for spot number 3. I'm doubling it up again. At spot number 3, we have the Roscoe repaint and the action hero character from the movie. Ideally, these would be a 2-pack, but they can't be because Roscoe, of course, is deluxe, and this guy uses Roscoe's mold with a light bar up top. This sheriff character was originally the one taking the number 3 spot, but I just couldn't decide between him and the action hero character. Of course, the black car with an orange stripe. Both of them have quite a few lines throughout the episode, and yeah, I just had to have them share a spot because I'd like to see them both equally. They're both very cool, and if we get one, I'm sure we're bound to get the other. The spider car comes in at spot number 2, probably my favorite sort of background gag from the entire series, with this car on giant spider legs, and the mouth opens up to reveal just the car acting inside. This is another one where I immediately thought, I've got to see them release this. How? I don't know. Maybe they could pull it off as a deluxe. Hopefully they could. It's probably not all that big. Maybe if you do detachable legs that you have to assemble yourself, then they could probably pull it off. Ideally, I guess, I'd like to see the mouth open up to reveal the car inside. You know, the mouth could be a plastic accessory that fits over it. I don't mind if it doesn't open up, honestly. It doesn't really matter to me. If it's going to look better being permanently closed, then I'd probably prefer that. At spot number 1, we of course have Deputy McQueen and President Mater. If this were a top 10 list, these two would probably be tied for the number 3 spot. I love these variants so much. They're so oddly specific and make zero sense out of context, and that's what I love about them. Ideally, I hope we get these two in a 2-pack, and I hope we get them soon, okay, because I need Mater as the president. And of course, Deputy McQueen would be very nice as well. We don't have Lieutenant McQueen from Mater Private Eye, and this is another McQueen as a police officer. But of course, he's sort of dressed up as a park ranger this time, which is pretty cool. But yeah, these two take the number 1 spot for B movie. Road Rumblers easily has some of the most diecast potential in the entire series, and is one of the episodes that's yet to receive any diecasts. Honestly, kind of a surprise to me. Although, of course, it was recently announced that we'll be getting a color changer of McQueen with his beautiful shovel beard. Speaking of which, at spot number 5, we have Road Rumbler, Lightning, and Mater. Once again, throwing a Lightning and Mater variant combo on number 5 on the list. These two are necessary. They're fun. They're funny. Yeah, I don't really have much to say about them. How many pairs of Lightning and Maters have I talked about on this list already, right? Once again, they're coming in at spot number 5 because they're ones that we definitely need to get. And definitely will, of course. Number 4 is just going to go out to literally any of the post-apocalyptic background characters. Any of them, any one, I'll take. Quite a few are based off of Demolition Derby cars. Those really aren't my favorites out of the background characters. I'd prefer some of the other ones, probably. But yeah, just any of them. A lot of characters in this episode. A lot of characters didn't make the cut. Unfortunately, you won't be seeing the Chief Disc character making the top 5 list, or the little Volkswagen Beetles that carry her, although that would be hilarious. I need to buy 4 so that they can carry her if they make them. But yeah, just throwing this one out for all of the background characters. Once again, nobody really in particular. This is just a group of cars we need to get some representatives from. At spot number 3, we have Jeremy. Jeremy is the little blue car that appears all throughout the episode. He, of course, is the one that gives us some exposition. He's the one that sort of agrees with Lightning and Mater and is the first to leave with them at the end. I really like his design, and he, of course, is meant to stand out from the rest. He's a lot smaller than them, and he's painted in blue compared to the dark gray colors for all of the other characters. He probably has one of my favorite designs in this episode, and that's saying something because there are a lot of great designs in this one. I think it's the way that the blue contrasts the dark gray and the spikes and all that really makes this guy pop out to me. Also, the fact that he has several speaking lines and is a named character doesn't hurt that either. At spot number 2, we have the electric cars with their solar panels and their little electric prods. If we don't get any of these at some point in the next few months, I will be greatly upset, okay? This is one of the funniest concepts I think I've ever seen the Cars series do, ever. The fact that we have an episode with cars using gas warring against electric cars is just so funny. And these electric cars, please, just release at least one. Be nice, give us at least one. I think these are some of the most likely cars that we'll get from this episode. I think we'll definitely get 1 or 2. At spot number 1, we have Captain Longleggy, the souped-up ice cream truck in the apocalypse. Yes, he actually is credited as Captain Longleggy. That's the best name we've got, so, that's the name I'm sticking with. Why do we have more than one monster truck ice cream truck in the Cars series? I don't know, but Captain Longleggy certainly stands out from the ice creamer because he's based off of an old school delivery truck. He uses a model similar to Dustin Mellows. He uses the same sort of model as cars like Dustin Mellows, Miles Meat Truck Malone, and the Nazca delivery truck, but souped up on these giant stilt legs with huge monster truck wheels. And of course, he also has his little ice cream up top. This is a car that I think is just simply too big to be released, and I don't know how they pull it off. Once again, I'd say go for a multi-pack, or maybe sell him disassembled, where you have to connect the wheels to the top. I think this is one that Mattel's going to be determined to make, and I'm going to do a whole discussion video on this in the future, probably, on the fact that there are a lot of cars on the road that are just too big to be deluxes. Maybe it's about time they introduce a new sort of line for cars, maybe like a super deluxe. Isn't that the name of a Kirby game? I forget. But, something like that. Deluxes, but a bit bigger. You could, of course, sell them for a little bit higher of a price and release all of these much bigger characters that are on the road. But yeah, Captain Longleggy, we gotta get him somehow, and I'm sure we will. It's just a matter of how. Also, shout out to the pre-apocalypse Captain Longleggy. That guy almost made the list. The last episode of the season, Getting Hitched, was honestly one of the most difficult ones to come up with releases for. Cruz, of course, prominently features throughout the episode, but we know we're getting her diecast out this month. So, knowing the fact that we're getting Cruz definitely made this list quite a bit harder, because she probably would have been pretty high up on the list. Sorry if some of the entries for this one sound a bit like stretches, but still, we're going to make this work. At spot number 5, we just have the wedding guests, just in general. Lots of blank background characters. You guys know that I love my generic, modern American car background characters. They're great for making a series. They're great for just being generic background characters if you want a diorama, or again, if you need background characters in a series, or just characters to play out any sort of scenario. Always love getting blank background cars, especially modern American vehicles. We get a lot of classic, old-school American vehicles in the Cars Diecast line. We get a lot of foreign cars from places like Cars 2 and such. And as cool as those are, it's always nice to just get generic, modern-day cars, types of cars that you could see when you are on the road. See what I did there? At spot number 4, we have the Pity that's supposed to do the wedding, but of course storms off. And I want to see this guy for one reason and one reason alone. His mustache. It is immaculate. It's incredible. It may very well be one of the greatest mustaches we've ever seen in the car series. It curves upwards. It's crazy. It doesn't even make sense. He's a car. Why does he have a mustache grill that looks like this? He's a Pity. What Pity has a grill? Yes, Chick Hicks's did, but of course those are all fake. His is probably fake too, because it's just too intense. Look at the curvature on the mustache. You think I'm joking? I'm not. I want to get this car just because of the mustache. At spot number 3, we have what is probably the single stupidest car on this entire list, but it's easily one of the ones that I want the most because the concept is so ridiculous. In each episode of On the Road, we see the title of the episode written somewhere within the episode's scenery. Of course, it's not supposed to be that actually happened. It was just a clever way for them to present the title of each episode, and I think that was a pretty cool idea. In Getting Hitched, the title, Getting Hitched, is written in the back window of a car. Originally, I thought that this was just any random background character, but upon rewatching, I realized it's written in the back window of Mateo, who of course is the groom at the wedding. I think this would be such a hilarious diecast to get. A variant of Mateo that says Getting Hitched in the back window, just referencing the title of the episode. A tangible toy version of the title card gag from this episode. I think that would be just the funniest thing. They would never, ever in a million years do it, but this one is just like one of my pipe dreams. This is probably one of my most wanted things on this list because I know that we'll never get it. I just think it would be really funny, though. If Mattel were still doing Super Chases, this would be a really funny one to release alongside a wedding version of Mateo. Speaking of which, at spot number 2, we have Mateo, who is easily my favorite new character from this entire series. I absolutely love this guy. He's pretty great. But I'm a little concerned with what Mattel is going to do when it comes to releasing him. Mateo, of course, has a little flower in his rearview mirror during the wedding, and I'm kind of afraid that Mattel is just going to release a wedding version of Mateo and not a normal version of him. Mateo appears without the flower on him in the episode's post-credit scene when he and Mato are stuck in the world's largest tire maze, but I really hope we get both. I think the ideal way to release Mateo would be to do a wedding variant of him in a 2-pack with a wedding variant of Mato. You could have them both have the just married written in their back windows. You could have the flower, of course, on Mateo. And then you could release the normal versions of the two of them separately or as a different 2-pack or something like that. I just really want to get a normal Mateo since it would be really useful for a lot of scenarios. And of course, Mato takes home the #1 spot for the episode Getting Hitched. Originally, when this list was a top 10 list, Mato and Mateo were going to share the #1 spot overall, and I think that still holds true here. These two are easily probably the most important diecasts you can make from Cars on the Road, especially Mato. I already talked in my Mateo segment about how I think they should release them, do the wedding variants in a 2-pack, and then release the normal variants. Otherwise, I think getting a normal Mato is far more likely than Mateo. I'm sure we'll see both variants of at least Mato, and again, hopefully both variants of Mateo. But regardless of what they choose to do for Mateo, we need Mato, and I'm sure that we'll get her very, very soon. And there you have it, guys, my top 5 most wanted Cars diecasts from each episode of Cars on the Road. Let me know what cars you want to see made most from on the road in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye now.